Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is YLAM here. I am with the master of Tiny Whoop here, Jesse P. How you doing, man?
I'm feeling great. This has been so much fun, you know, here at the Multi-GP International Open 2018. This is the FPV party of the year, so it's hard not to be feeling like $1 million around here. There's tons of happy people having a blast.
Yeah, definitely. We saw the party going on over here, so how's Tiny Whoop Nation right now?
It is great. The community really came out last night. We threw a huge party at the Tiny Whoop International Open tent out here by the wing track. We've decked out this course with every single giant feature we've ever made. The only thing I wasn't able to bring on this trip was the projector gate. But we fit everything else Tetrised into this trailer and drove it 18 hours across the country and pretty much set up every LED feature we've ever built or hired to have built. So we've got just all the fun stuff, including the reflective hyperdrive tunnels and the mirror kaleidoscope tunnels and, LED trees, several different kinds of LED gates. I think we've got like 35 LED gates in there that are all commission built. And, oh, a wing just went right over us. But yeah, the course over there is a blast. We got tons and tons of people cranking through it last night. I've been offering my Tiny Whoop for anyone to fly because moving this course around wasn't easy. And Multi-GP was kind enough to help us cover the cost to move the entire course here. And because of that, we can pretty much offer it to, we can offer it to everybody here. So I'm just doing everything I can to get people to experience it. It's one of those things kind of like the first time I ever flew a FPV Light Tracks course by David Mokay. It just makes you feel elated. It's so intense and psychedelic and sensational. So that's really what it's all about, is trying to get tons of people to have that aspect of FPV while they're here. Tiny, sensational flight.
It is. It's awesome, especially some of your new LED gates, and they're crazy when you watch them on Facebook. So.
Yeah, they're all from the community. We crowdsource all of our gate and feature ideas. So for the last Invitational, I just asked people what are all of the features that we should have at the Invitational race in 2018. We got a gigantic hundreds of comments on that post, an incredible amount of people that were excited to contribute their innovation. So we've got a tunnel in there called Rudy's Hyperdrive. It was designed by a guy, it was invented by a guy in Germany, and then this one was designed and built by Tiny Whoop's LED guy, Dean, who's in there right now. We've got another spiral tunnel in there called the World Record Tunnel that was an idea by my friend Spirals FPV in Finland. The kaleidoscope mirror tunnels I first saw and I believe were created for the first time in Hong Kong by Hong Kong FPV. And that's pretty much how this course is. Every element of it is a contribution from one of the 30,000 people on our Facebook group who's always trying to innovate for their local chapter, somewhere around the world. And I'm lucky enough to crowdsource all of those ideas and just put them in one room. And that's what people are excited about with the Tiny Whoop IO.
That's pretty cool. I will have to admit, though, in terms of Facebook communities, yours is probably the most close-knit, and it's really nice to be in there. It's super cool Facebook group. It
is really fun. It's weird. It's not appropriate to call it my Facebook group because, like I've said before, Tiny Whoop for years now has been a runaway freight train, and there's no single person behind the wheel. There's nobody driving the train. It's just barreling forward with tons and tons of people pushing it from behind as hard as they can, and that's whose Tiny Whoop group it is,
Sorry, Jesse, you're still the head of it. I don't care
I'm
what
the
you
admin.
say.
I'm the admin.
You're the admin. All right, you can say that. We won't believe you, though. But tell us a little bit about some new innovations that you're bringing out.
Well, in addition to everything on the course, I wish I could take responsibility for some of the most important innovations that have happened at Tiny Whoop in the past 6 months. I certainly can with some of them, but the most important thing that's happened to Tiny Whoop lately is certainly the arrival of a new flight controller called the Tiny Whoop Zero. And I hesitate to say this because I understand it's a controversial thing to say, but I do believe it's true. The Alien Whoop Zero board just obsoleted every Betaflight board for Tiny Whoop, including the Acro B, or not, I meant to say B-Brain, but also the Acro Whoop. I always confuse. There's like Acro B whoop,
there's a
B
lot of
whoop,
them.
crazy
Yeah.
B, Acro B. Everybody's got a B or a whoop in their knockoff names. But all of the Betaflight flight controllers for Tiny Whoop, you know, that's a set of software developed by the community for 5-inch acro flight. Betaflight's never been too concerned with angle mode flight, and so most of us, you know, I've been flying the Tiny Whoop Racer, which still uses the Inductrix FPV board, simply because it's a much better angle mode. It's much more responsive. Betaflight can't compete with that. And now that the Alien Whoop Zero is here, for the first time we've got a set of acro software that's made for Tiny Whoop. It's not adapted from Betaflight, which is a community project that, again, never cared about angle mode, but has barely cared about Tiny Whoop. It's been software written for 5-inch quads. Now, a piece of firmware built for a toy drone has been adapted to the Tiny Whoop flight style and the needs of Tiny Whoop. And it feels way better in acro mode. It feels like I have a better understanding of what have always been limitations of Tiny Whoop acro flight. The moment I flew a Zero for the first time, it's obvious to everybody that there's more control over the aircraft in some really important ways. And doing rolls and flips are way easier. Staying balanced on... I always picture Tiny Whoop as, when I'm in acro mode, or any quad, it's sort of balancing on a point, like on a ball, and it could fall off at any moment. And for some reason, it always felt like Tiny Whoop was much faster to fall off and lose its control over harnessing gravity, compared to 5-inch, which has always felt easier to fly in acro mode. And I think some of the listeners can agree with that. Acro just feels more difficult on Tiny Whoop than it does on a 5-inch, but this really changes that in a huge way. So it uses Silverware instead of Betaflight. I didn't name Silverware. I actually don't know the origins of that name, but that's the name of the firmware or the software package that's running the acro mode on these aircraft. And that's been adapted by someone called Not Fast Enough, this guy Travis, who's here from the U.S. He put his tune through this new software package and adjusted some parameters for Tiny Whoop equipment and for all the best Tiny Whoop equipment, and put together a software package that is so good that I really am willing to say Betaflight is obsolete in the world of Tiny Whoop. And it's hard to say. Like, I just said it to a gentleman who was stopping by the tent from the Alaskan Drone Racing League, and his buddy looked at him and said, "Your entire fleet," he's telling you, "your entire fleet's obsolete. You know, your B-brains." He's got a fleet of B-brains, and they're great. You can have so much fun with Betaflight, and I have. I feel like I've had more fun than anybody flying Betaflight in acro. I love it. But it's all of that experience that made me realize now with the advent of the Alien Whoop Zero running Silverware with software from Not Fast Enough, there's much more control now. So that's a really long answer to your question.
No,
I feel like
great.
I haven't let you talk for a while, but it's a big thing that's been happening, and it's a big deal for Tiny Whoop because you come to an event like this where every pilot here flies a Tiny Whoop. Every single one of these 300 or 400 pilots has their own Tiny Whoop, but they tend to think of Tiny Whoop as a seasonal or after-hours aircraft. So, you know, it's something you fly after it's dark out because you fly it inside, or you fly it during the winter. Or, you know, it's certainly more popular in places with longer winters and shorter daylight hours. But now with Silverware happening and with the Alien Whoop Zero, backyard acro is making a pretty huge movement in the Tiny Whoop world. It's really fun to fly acro indoors, and some of the footage I'm close to releasing is like really smooth flips and rolls through gaps indoors in a normal 8-foot ceiling. But out in the backyard is a really fun place to fly acro if you're tiny enough. And we're seeing, you know, at tinywhoop.com, we're seeing that interest reflected in the sales because people are now having a blast, and to go practice their acro, they don't need to bring a couple bags to the park. They can walk into their tiny backyard and practice some pretty complex moves with ease, thanks to these advancements. So when you think about what's coming for the future of Tiny Whoop, I'm really excited about the Alien Whoop project and everyone involved in that, because they've got a team of, I think, 5 or 6 really passionate pilots. They all fly many packs a day, and they give each other input and have meetings, via Facebook pretty much every day. They're constantly in contact and making adjustments. There's a huge future for a team like that.
Awesome. I think one of the popular things to do with Tiny Whoop is actually to fly in acro for casual flight, and then if you really want to get into it, you can just flip over to acro, and it's really great hearing that there's actually specific firmware now for these tiny little machines.
Yeah, and the good news is, I still prefer a Tiny Whoop racer for my angle mode racing or angle mode exploration. It's still a little bit snappier, but I am very confident that they are going to make the proper adjustments, and they can do a lot better than this toy flight controller we've been relying on for over a year.
Okay.
They will improve on that. And so silverware is probably going to make a much larger splash in the Tiny Whoop world in the future. It's already extremely popular. It's sold out all over the world, the first batch. The second batch of flight controllers is just arriving now, and depending on when this audio is released, it could be hard to get a hold of, but I can tell you that production has ramped up in a huge way, and there will be no shortages. There's, the goal of Team Alien Whoop is to provide this to everybody that wants one, and they're a small company just like Tiny Whoop, but they're fighting hard to make that happen, and
Awesome.
I'm sure they'll pull it off.
Okay. Where can they get them?
You can get it at tinywhoop.com or Alien Whoop's website. That's the only 2 places in the U.S. that sell them.
Okay,
right
cool. So hopefully, if you're interested in, well, we'll see when this podcast comes out. It should be within the next 2 weeks.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no big deal. So by that, by the time someone's listening to this, there's probably plenty of flight controllers available.
All right, sounds good. Anything else you want to talk about before we end this?
I just want to put a huge shout out to the Tiny Whoop community. Lately, it's been really fun online, and I've made a whole bunch of new friends, not just at this event, but just through people I've met on the Facebook group online. And I want to shout out and thank them every chance I get, because there's so many people who spend their evening leisure time, when they're not working and they don't have obligations. They spend that time putting in hours into innovating Tiny Whoop, and I am bound to feel thankful for that. It's a huge gift, because I love Tiny Whoop flight so much. It's become so important to my life every day, and I can't describe how important it feels to me. And when I get new innovations from someone I've never met, and they're excited to show me and bring me, to their page, it's a gift every single time.
Definitely. Yeah, we love the community. I love being in there. Definitely a very passionate group. Well, I shouldn't call it a group. It's like a nation. It really is.
Yeah.
There's so many people.
Tiny Whoop Nation. We're just about 30,000 people now on Facebook, and we've been back and forth for a very long time. We were the largest group in FPV on Facebook. And just recently, Rotor Riot passed us again. So we've been back and forth with them for about a year. And I brag every time we get like 1 member more. I get online and I brag with the largest group. You're a part of the largest group of FPV on Facebook on the planet. That's what I tell everybody. And then a week later, Rotor Riot's admins go on there and approve some more people, and then they're a couple ticks above us for a second. But yeah, it's huge. It's incomprehensibly huge. If it was half of its size, I wouldn't have a better concept of it. There's so many people. Yeah, it's incredible.
Awesome. It's awesome.
I feel so fortunate.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate the time, Jesse. Is Tiny Whoop Nation or the Tiny Whoop Facebook group the best place to reach out to you?
Tiny Whoop Facebook group is definitely the best place to get any information about Tiny Whoop, because like I say, 30,000 people. Well, first of all, the Facebook group is called Tiny Whoop Micro FPV Pilots of the World, but if you just, search Tiny Whoop, it's the only gigantic group with 30,000 people. There's so many people on that Facebook group pressing refresh over and over, waiting for someone to ask a question so they can help. It's an incredible place to get help. I'm always on that group. You'll see my posts, several times a day there. I'm a big active member of the community. You can also find me at tinywhoop.com and contact me through there. But yeah, I would love to help anybody out there who wants to get into the gift of flight through Tiny Whoop or in any other way. I'm happy to help. My team and I are standing by.
All right, great. Appreciate the time, Jesse.
Thank you, Y.